Since the latest episode of the European report, there have been important and sometimes dramatic developments in the Middle East, which is an ever-changing region. We have seen the latest conflict in Gaza between Israel and the Islamic Jihad. We have seen the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We have seen Iran's growing threats and nuclear capabilities. But we have also seen positive developments in terms of EU-Israel relations. Today, in this program, we will discuss the overall security situation in the Middle East and its implication on EU-Israel relations. To do this, I am joined by MEP Lukas Mandl, member of the European Parliament from Austria, and Tomas Sandell from European Coalition for Israel. Thank you for joining me. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz of European Jewish Press and Europe-Israel Press Association. This is a new episode of European Report. My first questions to you, MEP Mandl. We have seen this conflict in May between Israel and the Islamic Jihad terrorist group, which ended with a ceasefire brokered by Egypt after a barrage of rockets into Israel's territory. What is your takeaway of the outcome of this conflict? And do you think that calm will prevail in the future, or it will start again?
I hope calm will prevail, of course. Thanks for having me in the program again, and thanks for raising this important issue. Time is crucial to understand that Israel has to defend itself all the time against plenty of enemies from outside. Israel is our strong partner, and even we in European Union have to not only understand but to support Israel in the defense of what's really there. It's developed civil society, it's business, it's outreach to the world, it's arts, it's education, everything is there. And I always admire that Israel is managing to do both at the same time, to defend itself against brutal enemies on the one side, and to uphold democracy, rule of law, civil society, as mentioned, at the same time. And this is what, again, was necessary in May. I hope, again, calm will prevail, but we know Israel is surrounded by enemies, which are not only enemies of Israel, but enemies of the free world, of the values we jointly represent, and which are also outreaching with their terroristic means and measures also to the rest of the world.
And I remember last year, during the similar conflict in Gaza between Israel at the time, it was Hamas, Austria showed solidarity with Israel by flying the Israeli flag on the building of the Chancellery and the Foreign Ministry.
And rightly so.
And is it still a strong support from Austria for Israel security?
I would say today's Austrian position is clearly on the side of Israel, and is clearly advocating for a stronger EU-Israel partnership in many different fields. Unfortunately, we have to talk about security a lot. We in Europe have to learn from Israel a lot about security, but when it comes to partnership, it's not only about security, and frankly, rightly so. We showed up with flag on the government buildings in Vienna, in Austria, of Israel, and again, there was criticism about that. And I again emphasized, if there would be terrorist attacks against France or whatever other state, and we will show up with the French flag, there would not be that criticism. And we have to clearly point out that these double standards, not even in the public sphere, can't be unresponded, so to speak. So that's why if there are terrorist attacks against our civilized world, against civilians of any kind, against women, children, men, and so on, anywhere in the world, we are not only allowed, we are even morally obliged also to show solidarity, even with showing up with the flag.
On the same topic, Tomas Sandell, do you think Israel was successful in targeting the responsible in the Gaza, responsible for the rockets launching to Israel. Do you think that Israel was successful?
Thank you, Yossi, again for doing a program together with us. And I also want to start by saluting Austria and, of course, Lukas Mandl for their exceptional support and friendship with the Jewish people. Coming back to the conflict, perhaps on a humorous note, I would say the biggest achievement or takeaway was perhaps the unity that came back to Israel so quickly. Because we all understand when we are faced with enemies who do not make any distinction between left or right or judicial reforms or not judicial reforms, it's a question of the existence of the Jewish state. We have to stand together as one, and I think this is what we saw in Israel during the course of the conflict and perhaps also afterwards. Militarily, of course, I think it needs to be said, it has been said many times before, that IDF, to quote Richard Kemp, Colonel Richard Kemp, the chief commander of the British troops in Afghanistan, who have said that IDF is perhaps the most ethical army of any army in the world. And I think it also applies to the recent conflict where Israel again had to be in warfare with terrorist groups who do not play by any accepted rules for warfare, but on the contrary hide behind civilians. And still IDF managed, like a skillful surgeon, just to eliminate these terrorist operatives. And I think they should be applauded for that work, ethically and militarily. Of course, at the same time, there are civilian casualties, and for us, I'm sure for Lukas Mandl and for myself, it doesn't matter if you're Israeli, if you're Palestinian, if you're something else, if you lose your life because of a brutal conflict, we always want to show our sympathy. As far as EU reactions, I think EU pretty much were constrained. I think there's a gradual shift in understanding the black or white when we look at the Russian aggression against Ukraine. There are no talks about trying to be neutral, trying to find a ceasefire or reach a peace at any cost. I think this moral clarity has somehow come back to Europe, at least when it relates to this conflict. But of course, again, I would like to see the same measures in terms of how we react to Israel, our best friend in the Middle East being attacked by terrorists. And again, although I think the EU is moving in the right direction, we are not quite there yet.
And how the EU, we're speaking about the European Union, could best play to have a constructive role in securing peace and calm in the Middle East, especially between Israel and the Palestinians?
Yeah. I think there are at least two dimensions. When we look at the broader picture, I think the European Union should be much more clear in the fact that we cannot be neutral observers when a democratic state is being attacked time and time again. We have to make a stand. And in this instance, I think it starts by the EU showing unconditional support for the democratic state of Israel. Of course, when it relates to the Palestinian issue, it's interesting, all my Israeli friends that I'm talking with, being in the intelligence community or diplomatic community, they don't speak that much about the Palestinian issue. They said there's one issue and one issue only, Iran. But of course, these issues are becoming one and the same, where we see that Iran are using its proxies to attack Israel through different type of terrorist groups in the Palestinian territories. And there I think the answer to your question is also related to how we deal with Iran and the Iranian nuclear threat, which is coming up, I understand, later in the program. But as far as the Palestinians, I think there should be zero tolerance for incitement to violence. And I know again here that Mr. Mandl and many of his colleagues have insisted time and time again that there should be a stop of the funding of Palestinian textbooks. And I think that's a starter if we are ever to live in peace.
Let's speak about Iran. MEP Mandl. We have seen recently the re-establishment of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and also under China auspices, but also we have seen Iran improving its relations with other Arab countries, especially Gulf states, United Arab Emirates. Do you think that these developments could have negative impacts on the Abraham Accords and also jeopardize the possibility of normalization between the Saudis and Israel?
They can, but we must not allow them to have this negative impact. And since you have already mentioned the Abraham Accords now, I want to emphasize what the Abraham Accords are really about. They are the only, and I want to underline that, the only positive geopolitical development in this century yet. The only. Can anybody mention any other positive geopolitical development in this century? No. Only the Abraham Accords are, let's say, shining a light into the right direction. Let's call it that way. And this is why we must not allow the Abraham Accords to be attacked by these developments, even when on a larger scale we see to be revealed how, let's say, the powers who attack freedom, who attack civilization as we understand it, are aligning more and more, like the Iranian regime and the Putin-Russian regime. Mm-hmm. They are aligning in this very conflict on European soil today, and this is why we even more have to unify the free world and have to fight back where it's necessary and have to strengthen our common efforts for the values we jointly represent. Talking about alignments in the region, we have to clearly observe who is supporting whom. As Tomas Sandell has mentioned, Iran is misusing proxies of various kinds, not only against Israel, but especially against Israel, but against all of us. We must not forget about that. It's not that we would be standing outside watching what's going on and taking a side. No, we are involved. We are part of the world, the part of the world which is attacked by Iran and its proxies. And this is why we have to jointly work together here.
On the same topic, while all this happened, Iran has launched multi-front attacks against Israel, trying to attract all its proxies to attack Israel, by using also other means in the world. Do you think, Tomas Sandell, it's too late, because also there is a growing fear of Iran getting the nuclear bomb very soon? Do you think that it's too late to stop Iran from getting this bomb, especially now that Israel is also warning the whole world that it's going to happen soon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, over the years that we have hosted this program in the European Parliament, this is an issue which has come up time and time again, and we always warned and say that, you know, is it too late? Obviously, logic would tell us that if it was late a few years ago, I mean, now it's really late. And we have to remind ourselves that the international community, including several US presidents, have always pledged to say that Iran will never have nuclear capabilities. Nevertheless, we see that Iran is closer than ever to achieving their goal, and I don't see any indications anywhere that anyone except Israel would be willing to try to stop Iran from achieving their goal. Of course, we also know that this is, I'm not a military expert, but this is a very, very complicated operation, or would be a very complicated operation. But again, exactly as you said, the current prime minister and I think the whole political establishment in Israel have also made it very clear, not only to say that, we hope that Iran will never get to this point, but it will not happen. So I think what it means for us is that we'll have to take into consideration a scenario where Israel would have to strike, a preemptive strike, to take out these capabilities, and it raises the questions the day after: what will happen? What would be the reaction of Iran? What would be the reaction of the international community, including the European Union? So this is a very, very serious matter. On the multi-front war, of course, as mentioned earlier, this is a reality, and we see it increasingly, not only in the Middle East, but also in Europe. Again, I would commend the European Parliament for already in January issuing a resolution calling for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard to be put on the terrorist list. But again, the Council is dragging its feet, and as we know, there are only individuals from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard who have been put on such a list, but not the entire terrorist organization. So again, here, we don't have any time to lose, and I hope it is high time that when I say the EU, I'm referring now to the High Representative to take concrete action.
And in the meantime, we have new reports over the possibility of a nuclear deal. There are pressure from the US, also contacts between the US and Iran, the EU pressing to have a deal. So all this is kind of big question mark.
Yes, and I would also add that Iran, as amazing that is, are making some diplomatic successes. Just imagine being elected vice chair of the UN General Assembly, which happened just recently. So I think the international community really has to wake up. I mean, this is like a minimum. I mean, that should never happen at any circumstances, but still, this is where we're at.
Let's now turn to the question of EU-Israel relations with you, MEP Mandl. You are very involved on this issue. You are a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. You are a member of the subcommittee on defense and security. I would like to know, we have heard EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Joseph Borrell, and Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen during a meeting. They mentioned the possibility of having next year's meeting of the EU-Israel Association Council in Jerusalem for the first time. Do you think that this possibility would mean a real sign of improving relations between EU and Israel?
I hope so. The colleagues and I here in the European Parliament are parliamentarily approaching the European Commission and have been doing that for many years in order to establish, I would say, the priority for convening the EU-Israel Association Council. And if it would happen soon, it would be very important for the future relations, because it's not only the talk, it's the walk we have to undertake. And this means not only convening the EU-Israel Association Council, but also creating a renewed EU-Israel Association Agreement. This is what we will need in many different fields. We live in different times than the times when the current EU-Israel Association Agreement was decided on. We faced various kinds of crises on the planet. We have faced a very different development in terms of digitalization and in many other fields. So there are many, many good reasons, important reasons, for creating a new EU-Israel association agreement, and we will keep working for that parliamentarily. And I expect the Commission to take action soon with priority.
We have seen also these last days the Israeli foreign minister making 7 visits to Europe very shortly since he's taking his office in December. This is also proof of the importance Israel places on its relations with the European Union. But how would it possible, in your view, what the EU should do to strengthen its relations with Israel?
I would say to take a clear stance, as Tomas Sandell said in a different context before, will be important. By the way, I find it highly impressive that the Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen visited those 7 European capitals. This is a clear signal, as you have mentioned,
including Austria,
including Vienna, the capital of my home country, Austria. I also had the privilege to meet with the honorable minister. So we will, let's say, take this stretched hand in order to create a better relationship. When I say we, I would say I can hopefully speak on behalf of the majority of this very European Parliament, which is acting on behalf of the people, citizens of the European Union. But I also hope this will be true for the European Commission, and taking a clear stance, as Tomas Sandell has stated, will be important. And also to understand that Israel is a strong partner. Friends of Israel would also be our friends, and enemies of Israel can never be our friends. This is so clear, not only due to the one or the other aspect, but due to the overall aspect that Israel is the only democratic rule of law-based state in the Middle East and a strong partner in many different fields, also far beyond its borders in terms of security.
In 1 year from now, there will be elections to the European Parliament. If you should do an assessment of the Parliament's stance towards Israel during the last 4 or 5 years, what would you say, Tomas Sandell?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Once, for someone who's been covering EU-Israel relations for more than 20 years. And in that respect, I would say the last 5 years have been positive. The overall assessment is that the EU and Israel are moving closer together. I also think it has a lot to do with the current political leadership here in Brussels. And I'm thinking in particular of the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, both of whom have visited Israel within the last 12 months. And I wish I could add a High Representative for Foreign Policy to that list, but I'm afraid that's where we still have a problem. That's where we still have the old Europe sort of attitudes towards Israel. But by and large, I think we have a leadership now that clearly understands that we need to draw close to Israel. I also see it on a member state level, and Austria is of course one example, but there are others, and maybe I should not mention too many countries here, but I also see the potential, say, for a problematic country like Spain, that they may change direction still over the summer, and I think this is worth taking note of, because Sweden, which will also be in the very critical anti-Israel camp, if you wish, have also changed direction. So something is happening in Europe. I would say, and actually going back to a conversation I had with David Harris, our mutual friend, former CEO of American Jewish Committee, he said, this is happening, but we have to remember politics is never, sadly, about morality. So I don't think there's a sudden, revelation that, we have to stand close with the Jewish people and Israel because of ethical principles, but of self-interest. Because you have to remember that Israel that existed 20 years ago when we started our organization is a very different Israel from today. And Walter Russell Mead, the Wall Street Journal columnist and author and academic, he pointed this out in a recent article, that today, looking at U.S.-Israeli relations, today Israel is a superpower. And from having been this moral superpower in a way in the past, today no continent, no country can cope without close cooperation with Israel. And this is something which is slowly but surely sinking in also here in Brussels in the top leadership.
Do you agree with this?
I agree, especially like the very last quote, because it's a clear message and it's also true in my view. I can only emphasize that. And the question is also the outcome of the election in a year from now, as you have mentioned, and what as a parliament we will push the Commission for. And I guess the next Commission must be contributing to more strength to the outside for Europe in its entirety, and less bureaucracy to the inside, more freedom to the inside, and more strength to the outside. And this will mean to align much more with Israel, to also fill a renewed association agreement with Israel with new life, and to even achieve, I would say, new objectives we don't even yet know about, as soon as the new European Commission will set the right priorities. And this is what we will have to parliamentary push for. But before that, as you have mentioned, there is still 1 year of work ahead. Then the voters will have the say, the ultimate say, as it should be in a democracy. And then we will push for strength to the outside, freedom to the inside. And this will also mean to align in many different fields much more with Israel.
This brings us to a close in today's program. I want to thank you, thank the panelists and MEP Lukas Mandl and Tomas Sandell from the European Coalition for Israel. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz, and you have watched the European reports. Before seeing you again at the next episode, I would like to ask all the viewers on YouTube and other platforms to share this program, and also to react and to, of course, to ask questions. Thank you, and see you at our next episode.